You are held
Yeah, you're going to be held accountable.
Well, that's the beauty of the people we have in this show tonight. I mean, it kind of no holds barred. Obviously, not going to name names, but
yeah,
not too, but
I think the reason, and Will, I think we have to say, oh, I got to turn off my volume on that. One of the reasons we brought Will on is because like we wanted people that like we actually could vibe with and spend time with. We're not just bringing people on just to bring them on. So I honestly think Will, you were the first person we actually all agreed on. So
no doubt.
I was the first person that went. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out.
That we all agreed. We were like, yeah, that would be a good choice.
Okay.
Because we were tossing around. It was like, hey,
honored.
who all can we bring in? Supplement company owners or whatnot. And then it kind of got into the whole realm of bias. And there's certain aspects about every company. So I jive well with your personality and your products and what you do. So I'm glad to talk.
Right.
And your love for chickens that equals mine. It honestly, it just,
I love the stories. Wait, where are the updates? I want to see where like the little babies are and stuff. I haven't seen updates.
The problem, dude, and I'll tell you guys this and everybody watching. One of the chickens has passed away.
Oh no!
What?
Really?
It's unfortunate. It was a Tony. The kid next door in cold blood murdered Tony out of the tree. And that was right after they had their chicks, man. So I've been kind of taking this past week to mourn a little bit, and but don't worry, they're coming back. Our roosters will return.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that just derailed.
That's reassuring.
Well, no, I wanted to be 100% honest with you guys.
Wow. That's heartbreaking.
Well, on that note, let's at least intro. This is the Supplement Industry Roundtable. This is streaming right now on PricePlow's YouTube, but I think we're going to be diversifying this over time. I guess on YouTube, it's me. Above me is Jacob Davis from the Nutrition World LLC. Across the way is Justin Hall from SupplementSnoop, and our first guest on the show, Will Whitlock from Leviathan Nutrition, but also has so many other cool things we can talk about. So we're so excited to have you on, Will. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, man. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Hopefully we get into some pretty exciting stuff. We'll see what happens. So
last time kind of served as an intro for all of us. We spent more than enough time talking about everything that we do. So I figure if it's cool with you guys, I think we should start off with get a little bit of background on Will.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So I basically, I guess, like my two passions that I've had for a very long time are with chemistry and then also with bodybuilding. I mean, I've competed in bodybuilding. I did one show back in 2014, kind of still want to pursue it. And then I got my degree in chemistry from UCLA in 2013. So ever since I was going to school, I kind of always wanted to do something that either had to do with like pharmaceuticals or supplements. Like back in the day, I kind of wanted to get my degree and then like start working for Muscle Tech as like a chemist or something. But like I didn't really know how the industry worked back then. I mean, I thought their guys in lab coats were like legit. I was like, damn, I want to do that. But I mean,
what do you think?
Didn't quite turn out that way.
And, what happened?
So I ended up starting my own company, Leviathan, back in 2018. Our first product was Tudka. I didn't really have like a serious set of goals for it. It's kind of just something that like I wanted to use myself, and I had friends who also like wanted to use Tudka consistently. So I had a bit of a market already. It was just something that there's like a lot of difficulty in sourcing a good quality Tudka because it's a very expensive ingredient. So that's just something I worked on. But I guess kind of fast forward till now, came a little bit more familiar with how things work whenever it comes into the business aspect of things, especially working with Justin and Prady in the SupplementSnoop business consulting program. So, I mean, it's really exciting. I really like the business side of things and also the chemistry side of things. Having that background in chemistry really helps me to understand, how things work and what we can do, if anything possible, to make supplements that we take more effective and different things like that. And just helps me to continue innovating the products and doing what I want to do. And, just the type of company that we want to be for Leviathan.
Yeah, I can add a personal note to that. Prady and I, coming from the business side of it, sometimes we're like, Will, it's a really expensive product you want to make.
The conversation we have for
sure
just about every formula.
Will's like, I don't care what it costs. He's like, I want to put in the max to what's really going to benefit people and really help people. So one thing that's been able to help Will be successful is he's very driven. Whatever that focus is, there's no like wasted effort. It's not a confused, like, he's like, no, I'm going science. I'm going balls to the walls. I'm putting max effort in there. And then, he's been able to work with Jacob, because it's hard to do when you have really expensive products, really expensive formulas, to find a retailer that sort of fits in. And you met Jacob definitely that way. So it's been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, we've we've actually been able to. I think the expensive side of that, like in any company, we're not just saying for Will, when you get into those more expensive SKUs and products and fully packed formulas, initially it's kind of hard to get the ball rolling in retail, because people, they're used to picking up, let's say, like a multivitamin for $20 or $25, and then you show them something like Ire, which we retail for $49.99, and it's a different conversation. But once we get people that consistently love it and they see the results, they get the blood work, then you've got the ball rolling in the business aspect with Ire. I mean, we've I'd say every 2.5 weeks I'm hitting up Will, maybe 3 weeks to just re-up, and they're not crazy amounts because we don't move crazy volumes yet. We're not a massive store, but I appreciate you working with us, Will.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for reaching out, and I appreciate the fact that you care also about educating people. I mean, if people ask me like how I can best summarize how Ire works, I'll usually just show them your video, because like I don't even have a video that goes step by step through each of the ingredients like you, and then of course your editing is very good. So thanks for releasing that so I can use it.
Of course, no. I mean, that's my goal, man. I mean, obviously, I don't have the level of knowledge that you do or that a chemist would, but at least if I can get some kind of base understanding of how something works, we're going to try to explain it to people. Don't leave them
right. I mean, you're definitely knowledgeable, and you can educate people in the form that it's tangible for them to understand it, which is really the most important thing.
Right. I think that's something Ben can talk about too. Is Ben, like, how much time did you spend, like, in your career, going to retailers to help them understand the products that are sort of going out there? And that was one thing we talked to Will about. I'm like, if you can work out something with Jacob, I was like, he's got you. Like, you don't have to walk Jacob through the entire process. So it's like part of that cost analysis that you do trying to get in retail. And like Ben, spending a lot of time just trying to help retailers understand how to sell your products can be pretty time consuming.
I remember the first time I sat down, I did a meeting with, it was 25 managers in Manhattan. And we all sat down in the same room, and I did this presentation to them. It was kind of encompassing NutriBio's offerings we had in GNC. And I remember everyone took notes and everyone was really appreciative, but afterwards, like, the regional sales director came up and was like, you have to dumb that down. Like, I'm sorry. Because I remember going through like Intrablast, which is like a 28-gram intra workout, and it has like, it's just a ton of just ridiculously specific amino acids. And I went through what each one does, and they were like, not that much. Like, just what does it do? And I think Jacob does a really good job, and this is a job that I have a lot of too, but like conveying to the end consumer, Mark Lidge did a really good job of explaining to me like features versus benefits. Like, when you're selling ABS brakes, you don't tell the consumer that it pumps the brakes 50,000 times per minute. You tell them it's going to save their kid from dying, and that's a really good analogy for Will's videos versus Jacob's videos. Like, when I have people ask me like how BioPerine works, I send them to Will, because if you really want to know, he'll explain it to you. But if you're a person that wants to know what Ire is going to do for you, Jacob's videos definitely convey it a little bit easier.
I appreciate that, man. And on the topic of Intrablast, that's actually our best-selling intra, EAA formula, simply because of the glutamine OKG and the OKG in there. Really, because, people are used to seeing all 9, right? They're used to seeing all the 9 amino acids, a little bit of estrogen in there, a little bit of coconut water, whatever, But the fact that we can like kind of hone in on that one specific benefit of, of that. It's the same thing for ire. I love talking about berberine hydrochloride. I do. And the possible benefits that come with it. So, that you pick one, you pick kind of your strong points and go with them.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. That was one thing that we talked to Will about was, when it comes to when you have an expensive formula and you're trying to get into retail and stuff like that, retailers are like ambassadors for your brand, especially if you find one like Jacob is. It's like, if you're going to have a sponsored athlete out there that you give a discount code to or something like that, it's like this retailer is going to be lobbying hard for your products. So we've always been really big on, Will, like, have we checked in with Jacob lately? Do we know if he needs anything, and vice versa? It's like that type of important sort of relationship is huge, especially for a company that you can't spend a shit ton on marketing and targeting ads and stuff like that. So that's why we were like, when you two first met, I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like, this is like a dream come true right here.
And I think, I think a lot of retailers, man, they're used to being, and this is just from my outside looking in, they're used to being approached by brands, right? And, I'm approached every day by brands that they're used to being handed numbers, right? That, hey, if you get us on your shelves, we're going to give you X margin. We're going to give you X freebie, X +1 deals. Well, that's all fan and dandy for some retailers, but then for people like me, I'm going to ignore that. Right. Or I seek out the brands. So, I guess I think the way that reps have gone about explaining and selling products to retailers in the past has been no bueno, because it hurts people like myself and people like Will and Justin and Ben who are out there trying to explain products, not just talk about numbers and margins.
Right.
Maybe a side tangent, but
right. And it seems
sorry, go ahead.
Like a lot of retailers that because before I've had retailers ask if they can carry my products. Usually it would just be for Tudka, but then like I showed them the margins, of course, and they're like, oh, we're not going to make enough money off of this. Like my other products are a little bit better, but I mean, like if you're a retailer and if you're confident that you can sell these products, you're still gonna be making a profit off of it. I mean, it just might not be as much as compared to some other products that you can buy for like sub $5 or whatever. How much?
Well, and
how much they sell wholesale.
And as the retailer, sorry to butt in. As the retailer, once it's on my shelves, in my opinion, now your job as Leviathan Nutrition CEO is done, right? You've gotten. I mean, not completely, right? You're going to support me. We're going to work together, but the margin aspect, the money aspect, like I can price Tudka at kind of what I want, right? And if my
that's the thing
if they trust me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, like. I doubt that all the people who would be coming into your store are familiar with, the price that we have in our shop for these products. So, I mean, retailers are always free to list the price a little higher if they want to make more money. That's totally up to them. But
Tudka's a hard sell too. I'm not going to lie. It's and it's not something I'm going to preach to people like, hey, you need to take your Tudka today. Like it's not Tudka a day keeps the liver enzymes at bay, but, it's one of those things that the margin it's not a huge deal, but
I think that in the end
too, the important part is when you get trust is a big thing with you and your customers. So it's like if you can show them something. A good thing about like say ire is there's like tangible results in blood work and people feel better and their health. So that right there is bigger than any margin that you're going to find because you're building customer loyalty through selling them a good product, and so it makes it a lot easier to push anyway. So it's a good fit. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, I think what's really important is that, and this is, I'm not a sales guy. I've worked in sales. I really never enjoyed it. I enjoyed my side of marketing and I follow a lot of Gary Vee. So this is going to kind of be in his stream of thought. But as a retailer, you have left your position as just like a middleman in the supply chain to the consumer. It used to just be from the ingredients to the manufacturer to the company to the store, and they just pick it up at the store. It's kind of just a place to get your product. You're becoming a one-stop shop for knowledge, your food, your supplements. I think I've seen the nutrition store become like a safe haven for the meatheads in Spartansburg, right? So it's more than just.
It's bad, man. It's not. It's so bad that we have a culture in Spartanburg that people know, like, oh, you shop there. Like you're one of the TNS guys. Like, I mean, it's kind of cool to be inclusive, but at the same time, yeah, you're not wrong, but it kind of makes me like, damn, where did I go wrong? Like, at least let's have some female shop, you know? Like,
I think the important thing is it's more than just like a price, right? We're not looking at just like, hey, well, Will sells it for this much, Justin sells it for this much, whatever. Like, it's just, it's more than that. You're paying for, and I just talked to this a lot with SupplementSnoop. You're paying for more than just the product. You're paying for the experience, paying for the knowledge and all that. So I hear a lot of companies, for lack of a better word, bitch about MAP and margin and stuff like that. And guess what? The most successful retailers that I know don't even think about it. You know, it's way bigger than MAP. I mean, having that protected is one thing that we don't have to really talk about today, but protection aside, creating that margin is not an issue for the right retailers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of, I was watching a story from Chris Waldrum, I think it was like last week or something, where someone asked him a question about like, how do I go about getting in retail stores or something like that? And he basically said, like, you want to look for the retailers who don't really, you know, because there's some retailers that all they care about is the margins. He basically said, like, those are the kind of people that you want to stay away from, because like they're not really thinking in the long run. Like, you want to be able to develop a good relationship with the retailer and make sure that like they care about the type of products that they're carrying. So I mean, seems like good advice.
Yeah.
I remember Sup's always telling me that I was their favorite rep when I was at Nutra because I never called them. Like, they called me when they needed something. And I mean, maybe that might say something about how I am as a sales rep, but they called me when they were out of stock, and that's, I mean, what more can you ask for?
Honestly, dude, that you just like, you made my respect for you go up even more. Like, even though you're not a sales rep anymore.
It's just, what am I, you haven't sold out of the product. How am I going to convince you to buy it? As to me, like, I'm not a sales guy, right? Like, I'm not going to like call you with a discount and try to convince you. Like, when you're out of it, call me. You know, that's just how I think. And it's probably a good thing I'm in content now instead of sales, but you know,
I mean that's how a good product should work, though. Like, you shouldn't really need that much coaxing into buying a product. Like, if you know, you try it out once and you know it works, that really should be enough.
Yeah, and I think you've done a good job of, you've become this, in my eyes at least, you've become the standard for Tudka. So like in the industry, I mean, I know of one other company that I trust, and a few more are coming into Tudka, but like for as long as I can remember, Leviathan's been the standard if you want to make sure your liver enzymes aren't fucked.
Oh, Will, dude, Ranson the other day was like literally like just oogling over your products. Ransom, when I sat down with him, and so expect an order from him, or either a collaboration on that down the road. He was just like, oh my god, because he sees all the people that, you know, he lifts with that take your stuff. So
okay,
yeah.
All right.
But yeah,
well, that's a good thing too, is like and that's another thing when you're, you know, Jacob, you've been around for going on 2 years now. You know, you're growing. Will's been around for a while. He's growing. You grow together. You know, Will's got more products coming that, you know, people are going to be able to add into their line. So, yeah, man, I think it's a good. I like to sit back and watch. I like to see it work for everyone.
I think that Leviathan has really shown like real recognizes real. Like, when you have Joel Sullivan talking about what Tudka does for your blood work, like, he knows, you know, like.
And, I actually, Pete, I'm waiting for Pete Rubish to post his blood work, because he got some blood work results. We talked about the results yesterday some. Yeah, it's a little weird though. I mean, his LDL is still a bit high, but he was basically telling me like he's always had LDL over 100 or something. So I guess there is a bit of like a genetic component to it. But I was pretty satisfied with, at this point, like after his meet, how his HDL was looking. His HDL was already at like 48 or something. So that's pretty cool. And then also I posted that video about Joe talking today. Actually, Stan McQuaid commented on the videos, like, well, this is a great video and a great product, you know, like I'll continue using it. That was pretty cool from the comment. Plus his account on Instagram has that little check mark. So I was like, oh, I got like a verified comment now. It makes me feel more official.
I think
Will shows us like emails that he gets like every single day, and I'm like, holy shit. And people are like, oh, it's cool that you guys, right? They're like, oh, it's cool you guys help Will out. I'm like, I didn't do anything. I was like, that's all him. I was like, that's all his products, his passion, the people that respect what he does. And like I said, it's one of those cool things is even when we're on conversations with Will, Will's like, I'm not, from initially, like our first conversation with a client is always, a very personal conversation. Like, what's your mission? What's, where are your values at? And Will's like, I'm never sacrificing shit. Like, fuck all these people that cut corners. He's like, I'm never doing it. We're like, hey, that's going to work just fine. Like, we can work with this.
Well, I think Will creates some products that like, see, like I identify a lot because like I'm a power lifter, and I think most Will's athletes that appreciate his products are power lifters because we kind of treat our bodies like shit. And then we like end up looking around like, how do I fix this? Like, please, someone. And
where's the Band-Aid?
Yeah. And so like, I mean, if you guys have followed Pete Rubish over the years, like he has posted some blood work that is like, it's been scary, And Will and I in private have talked about our blood work, and it's like, holy shit, like what are we gonna do about this? And so when you see like I think Sergio Oliva too, right? Was posted.
He uses some of our products too.
When you create a product that like professional athletes need because of like some less than legal things, like it's impressive, I think, at least, to see like people willing to admit like, hey, I needed this and it was there when I needed it. So
well, that's what's cool about like Will's IR product too is like I use it, and it's like you can use it, anybody can use it. It's kind of one of those things where it's loaded with really cool ingredients at such crazy dosages that you can, maybe move the dosages around a little bit and still be, perfect for just anyone. Like anyone can benefit from berberine and bergamot and things like that, and NAC, like that's good for anybody. So that's what I like about his products.
Not forget about Zenith. I mean, we've had about 3 people come off of their Adderall prescription completely in the last 2 months, and only by taking half of a dose of Zenith. We'll say, hey, start with 3 instead of a 6. And our main test subject, he's like, man, this is like the clearest headed I've ever been. I can focus on work. And I'm not making this up. I mean, because he was a lifelong user and prescribed, substances. And I was impressed because honestly, I don't personally take Zenith. I've read the, ingredient profile. I like it. I think it can help some people, but the feedback that he gave me. So yeah, I guess to, put more fire on top of that dosing strategy there. That's great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I would tell everyone, like everyone who buys Zenith, I say, like, even I usually just use like 4 capsules. It's a 6 capsule serving, but I say start with 3 or 4 or something, and then see how you do with it. And I think for most people that's enough.
Yeah.
I get the craziest pumps from that product. I brought that up to Will the first time. Like, I'll be sitting there at the computer and I'll take it. Next thing you know, I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? I'm like, Will, has this ever happened to you? Like if anybody's looking for an under the radar pump product, it's Zenith for sure.
Maybe I should start marketing it as that, because as a nootropic, like not that many people buy it from my store. I mean, but then I don't really advertise those kind of products all that much.
Now, because I'm looking at it now, like, what do you think? It's the Rhodiola and the Orion Genesis that gives you the pump? That's interesting.
I mean, I was wondering. I started asking, like, is there any kind of bronchodilator in here, or something like that's like opening up your airways for more like blood, and then I don't know, because like I've taken pure Synephrine before, and I know, not a smart idea, but I get a pump from that, and it's weird because you think stimulant, vasoconstrictive, all that.
Yeah.
Well, listen.
It does it to me every time.
The people about the stimulants and vasoconstriction, you gotta be careful, because Justin and I could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, that's a trigger word.
That's a short term, but yeah.
So I guess kind of I think on all of these topics, because Justin talked a little bit about pipeline. Will, with your products, do you see more of a sports nutrition aimed focus, or like what direction are you taking the company? Because right now you're kind of like parallel to the sports nutrition industry. You could dive in, But the offering that you don't have a pre-workout, you don't have a protein, you don't have an amino. You have a very unique position.
I think at least for the near future, we want to stick with like health supplements and those sort of things. Because I mean, I really don't have any urge to like make a pre-workout or anything like that. Just because I think there's already so many. And like the only reason that would really like get me interested in making something like that is if I found like a new ingredient or something, or just a way that I could do something different, which I really haven't given it that much thought. So, I mean, for now, like, and really for me, what interests me more is health, just for the reasons that we discussed before, like for helping like top athletes and stuff. Like I would say that they need more help with managing their health rather than things like pre-workouts and that type of thing. So that's kind of where I want to stay. And then it also helps us stand out a little more as a company. I mean, there are other like health-based supplement companies out there, but there's not nearly as many compared to like, the typical amino pre-workout fat burner type of supplement companies.
I think from a strategic point of view, the health supplements, you don't compete a lot. So Justin always talks about with scaling companies, you don't always have to find more customers. You could widen your offering and get customers buying more and continue the same amount of customers. With a product like this, you're adding another supplement into most people's regimen. You're not replacing stuff. So you don't have to fight for that, shelf space, as it were, which is a very cool opportunity. And
not to build the hype train too much, but you got some things coming that actually no one's seen before. It's going to be interesting that I think will turn some heads. No, I know it will turn some heads. They've already turned some heads. And because you're really interested in, there's a lot in the industry where it's a lot of follow the leader and a lot of cut and paste and a lot of, this ingredient worked for them, so I'm going to put it in mine. And Will's like, well, I read this 3,000 page research meta-analysis and this is what I found works, and so I'm going to use that. And then when the people in the industry see it, they're like, holy shit, like where'd this come from? And Will's like, well, if you read the research, then it's in there. But you know how that goes. But there's some cool stuff on the way that you really have to be into that and read stuff that no one else is going to read to really find some of this stuff.
It's hard. It's difficult too. Like, and I think Jacob can really attest to this the best. Like things that would, like Ranson. You're talking about Ranson coming into your store. The things that are going to help Ranson put 20 pounds more on his total when he's already an elite powerlifter are not the things that normal consumers want to do. No. They're not sexy. They're not interesting. I mean, like the things that it took me to go from a 675 squat to 705 squat, like I was not doing that when I was a normal consumer. And unfortunately, it's just not sexy and super sellable, even though like it's incredible the things that we can do. So that's my like biggest gripe is like these people aren't excited about doing real shit. Like most consumers just want to pump. I'm like, there's so much more to this. There's so many more cool things we can do.
And I think that's where I think that obviously it's not sexy, right? It's not pretty, but it could be. Mm-hmm. I think that's where companies like Glaxon does a great job with how they, even down to their labeling, which only reason I'm not just saying that because all their SKUs showed up at my store today.
That's cool.
Like the way that they present their product, even if it's, let's just say they came out with a multivitamin tomorrow, if they put that like their funky labeling and branding behind it and culture behind it, you can get people interested for sure. And I think, but that's with any company. It doesn't have to be supplements. So,
well, I think the really driving factor behind that is Glaxon does not give a fuck what people think about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Joey Savage is going to do whatever the fuck he wants. And that's just how it is. And I think if more companies had a really like clear mission and they really march towards that mission and that mission isn't copying other companies, I think we'd have a lot better of an industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of shows you too that I think sometimes we get so caught up in seeing the same things over and over again, and I try to act excited when I hear about new things sometimes, and I try to keep an open mind, but every time I look, I'm like, well, this is the same fucking ingredient we saw that we're just going to trademark it something else, and it's a different kind of green leaf or it's a different kind of fruit extra, it's the same thing. But then when you see people like them with a lot of resources and stuff behind them that are willing to be like, you know what, we think this is cool, and we're going to run with it. And they have the resources, they have the experience. I actually brought them up on a couple different calls today with people in different levels of the industry, because not just on a making cool products aspect, but they have a lot of knowledge when it comes to certain things that can help a lot of people that you don't know unless you sort of go through it. And they're also willing to help other people. They're doing really cool things, but they're also not doing it in a way like, oh, we can't let anybody else know what we're doing. They're doing it in a way that we're like, okay, let's level up this entire industry just a little bit. If we have to sort of, kind of push for it, we'll also help, and we'll also be totally open. Ben, I know me, the stuff that they tell me all the time, I was like, I mean, you just get surprised sometimes, like the amount of the behind the curtain they'll let you look at, because they're like, hey, this is something nobody else is doing, but we think other people should do it too. So let's, get the ball rolling.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, the best way to really give an analogy for it, give the example is like what they did with Specimen. Like, and it's kind of a very similar situation to Will, where I'm sure there's people asking Will to make a pre-workout because everyone takes pre-workout. And if you trust Will and Will's company, you're going to ask him, hey, I like what you do. This is what I take. And you make something instead. And I think it's really funny because everyone's like, Glaxon, you got to make a pre, you got to make a pre, you got to make a pre. And they finally were just like, fuck you. Like, and they made one. And Specimen like kicked all of our asses. And Justin and I were like, this doesn't look that bad. We full scooped it and we died. So it's like, yeah, I think I like when guys actually step up to the plate that know what they're doing. It's a really exciting time. I think like what Will was saying about muscle tech and the scientists and thinking that there was all that going on. I think we're in a really good, people talk shit about innovation these days, but I think that we're setting up for a really cool decade of supplements.
Some smart, and it's like we talk about, certain people in the industry get a lot of credit, for being like chemists that make formulas, but I mean, Will is, and he, Will does it too. Like, smart guy. There's some smart people getting involved in this industry because, I mean, there's money to be made. It's really, it's fun. You can be your own boss pretty quickly. So it's like, if they are given sort of, if the consumers are educated enough to like give it a chance to sort of think outside the box a little bit and let Will or these other guys bring some ingredients to market that's not, the citrulline and beta-alanines. If Ben and Jacob, in our respective roles can help people like go, hey, we should really like take a look at this, and then sort of get people going. And then next thing you know, we got a lot cooler products to talk about.
Well, I think that people, I'm going to go out on a little bit of limb here, but people who go out and call themselves chemists and their names and stuff and like to flaunt that they're chemists and stuff. When you talk behind the scenes with the people that have actually formulated like hundreds of products for everyone, they laugh at them, like these, the influencers that claim that they do all this really cool stuff. Like when you get really behind the scenes, like Justin, when you go to Supply Side West and you talk to the people that are actually doing shit, like it's like 6 grams of citrulline, like I got this brand new ingredient that none of you have ever heard of, and it's going to blow citrulline away. So it's kind of eye-opening when you start to realize like what really is out there.
Yeah, I think it was I can't remember who exactly was saying it the one day, but Ben and I, so we're not we don't have PhDs in certain things, but we put our opinions out there a lot. But you'll realize pretty quick, like if you sort of get outside that, like real scientists and really smart people will tell you, like, they're like, hey, wait a minute, like you should probably, and then that's why I never really like got into that, because I stay in my lane. Yes. But if you veer out of that, I watch other people do it and they just get fucking steamrolled, because it's like, go back to talking about citrulline and the nitric oxide.
Yeah. I think that everyone needs to find like really their real strength. I remember talking to Will about this. Like, I've realized that my strength is like taking the amount of knowledge that I do have and applying it actually in the gym and understanding like that real application. I call it like the science meets the iron, because not a lot of the real researchers have experience, moving iron, and whatever that does for me, it's relatable for a lot of people. But I don't ever go up to bat against someone like Will with like real science. Like I understand it. I understand enough to employ it, and I think that's important. But there has to be that person in the lab that doesn't actually work out. So,
Yeah.
but I think Will actually training is important. I had a meeting last year at the Arnold with a manufacturer, and they were presenting an ingredient to me, and they were showing numbers, and it was hilarious because a lot of these researchers that perform this research don't understand how significant, like putting 30 pounds on the bench press is like, what? Like, and I'm talking like trained individuals, not like your mom just jumps into the gym and puts 30 pounds. Yeah. And so it's hilarious when you look at these researchers and like, do you realize what you, and a lot of these ingredients never even come to market because they're not commercially viable, or like it's just, we can't afford to put it in a real product. But it's hilarious when the researchers and like the appliers, the applicators, whatever, like meet up. I think it's so funny.
Because they can realize like how significant those results actually are.
Yeah. I think I get really excited when Will does his videos. He talk a lot like hypothetically or theoretically a lot. And it's like, if we could do this, this could be really exciting.
Yeah. And I love thinking about things like that. Like, I don't know. I mean, if I had the resources to do some things and like that kind of money, it would be cool to mess around some, but
when you have the resources.
I think about costs a lot of money. So
we talked with Tim Mazai up at Myofactor, who works in real research as well. And I love when he sits down, he's like, we have the technology to do gene doping right now. And it's like, we're all sitting there like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Like I was just looking for a pre-workout.
Yeah. Tim's like, we could do it in your garage right now. I could do gene doping. We could make you a monster. I'm like, what?
Yeah, there's been a lot of conversations that I know Ben and I sort of like look at each other like, holy shit. Like, so it's hard to put that, like when people ask you about, supplements and fat burners and stuff like that. And then you're having another conversation with some of these people that are in these high level research facilities and stuff. And you're like, yeah, we should really like start maybe thinking about some of this other stuff. Like,
I think it also is interesting ethically wise too. Like people will love to say like, there is no fat burner ingredient that really burns fat. And you're like, it's out there. Yeah. There's stuff that does some freaky shit. But we're not selling it,
Yeah.
Most of them aren't legal.
Yeah. So we do have one question. We talked about berberine before, and I think this is, I don't know. Justin gets weird about GTAs, but I know three of us talk about berberine a decent amount. And someone was asking if berberine lowers lowers blood glucose levels, then does that mean a lower insulin response as well? Is that a good or a bad thing? So if we want to expand on berberine, it's one of my favorite topics.
Lower insulin response? No,
yeah.
It shouldn't. It should really make you more insulin sensitive, if anything. I can't really explain a mechanism for that, but I mean, basically, like if your fasted blood glucose, well, technically, like the lower it is, the more, and then you have a meal after that, the more you're going to be able to better utilize that meal and the nutrients in that meal. Like that's why whenever some people, whenever they take exogenous insulin, after a meal, then 2 hours later, 3 hours later, your blood sugar goes, like 50, 60, 70 or something. Then it's low enough for you to have another meal and then to be able to benefit a lot more from having that meal versus if your blood sugar was still, really high, like 100, 110 or something. I know there's a couple of bodybuilding coaches who kind of, who really focus more on that, like Phil Viz. Like a lot of his clients, he really wants to make sure that every time they're having their meal, that their blood glucose levels are going to be in a pretty low range, like below 70 or something like that. Just that way, you're going to better utilize the meal that you have.
Yeah, and I think that's why, to go to Ben's comment, why I've always gotten weird about GDAs, but I also get weird about probiotics and things like that, because what I see is I get a lot of questions from very beginner level people, and probiotics is extremely complicated, complex subject to sort of tackle, and GDAs are kind of the same way, where there's sort of a lot of things going on, and then the people, it gets simplified so much that it makes me just so uncomfortable that we a lot of times they're just like, well, I'll just take some probiotics because gut health and brain health and shit like that, and everything's fine. And then it's like, okay, we'll take a GDA because like nutrient partitioning. It's like, well, what the fuck does that mean? Kind of thing. So it's like, let's everybody just slow down. Let's take a minute. Let's all talk about it and stuff like that. But it definitely helps, like with what Will was just saying. I mean, it's like kind of one of those things where it's a fascinating topic. And it's like, okay, well, let's just, it's kind of like an industry thing too, how we find something cool in this industry and then we just like, like the Tommy Boy thing where we just get all crazy with it. And it's like, well, and then you leave it in shreds over there. And then you're like, well, all right, that was fun. Like we missed out on when we actually had a chance to sit down and talk about it. And then maybe another thing going back to Glaxon, what they talk about is a lot of the products that they've released are like their first step products because they're like, let's try this because we think this is going to do this. And if it plays out that way, we have a plan to step it up a little bit. That's what I think is cool. So it's like, okay, well, let's everybody chill just for a minute. Let's try to grasp this. And then we'll see how we can sort of, tack onto it. So that's why sometimes like I get a little weird about it.
I remember listening to the Supplement Engineer podcast where you guys had Joey on, and he was basically saying that. And then, which I think is like, whenever you hear him say that, that's really how you know that he actually has a scientific background, because, basically the mentality that a scientist should have is like, there's probably always a way to improve things, or you should always think of ways to improve things. And then you could always be aware of the fact that what you may be trying out may not work like as effectively as you think it might, or something like that. But it's really cool to see them to be able to take that mentality and just say, like, here's what we have right now and it probably works, and there's probably a way to work make it work better. And then just figuring out what steps that they need to take to go from where they are now to make that better.
Yeah, it's like one of the big cons of the supplement industry, or the big stigmas against it, is you can bring something so quickly and just get it out there without really any sort of research when it comes. But that's also kind of like part of our strength too, if you use it right, is, man, we can get some stuff out in people's hands, and we're all guinea pigs. We all like it, and then we like to talk about it and stuff like that. So it's like kind of one of the things that is a big black eye on the industry, is also one of our strengths. So I think that's why it's like, well, if you can get people together, like when we get sent products from somebody, Glaxon or something like that, they know that we're going to really give them some feedback about it. And that's why they look to us to help them. Because it's like, well, if you start throwing stuff out there and you can't know where the feedback is coming from, and then everybody's just kind of chasing their tail and guessing too much. So it's a cool thing. We can sort of use it to our advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's tough because everyone thinks they have the best product, and I think I touched on this in a certain review I did last week a little bit. Like, everyone really wants to think that they make the best shit out there. And I think the best lesson I've learned in this industry is that, like, everyone honestly really does believe that. Whether or not they have a good product is one thing, but like, your contract manufacturer, like your employees, you're like, everyone's gonna tell you have the greatest thing. And if we're going to help anyone out with that, like, we have to like approach it knowing that they think that. They probably in their hearts really do believe that. So I really appreciate Joey, because he can improve on an ongoing basis. But then when I see like big companies are like, we have the best free workout, it's the best free workout, I'm like, well, something's going to change next year. And this is like, I remember, guys, what was the website? The Supplement Review, the SupplementReview.com. They used a quantitative system to review their products. And I always thought that was kind of off, because like next year we might find out that some ingredient doesn't work. Like arginine was all the rage in the early 2000s. Doesn't do shit. Like, and if we had given that like a 95 or whatever back then, today it'd be like a 72. Mm-hmm. So I'm inspired by people who are willing to bite the bullet and say, yeah, that wasn't it, and we got to improve it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the concept of what science is anyway, right? I mean, admitting that it's ever changing and moving forward. And, the moment that we put up smoke and mirrors and act like we're the end all be all, or if we make products that are the best, you're admitting that you don't understand the fundamental concept of what science is, because especially with what we do with nutritional science specifically, I mean, it's changing, dude. I mean, back in I hate to use this reference, but I mean, go look at nutritional science in the late 1970s. egg yolks are going to make your cholesterol go through the roof. You know, what is it? Fat was bad, so eat low fat, high sugar.
Yeah.
But that's any field of science. So people who say they have the best, or that they have a higher comprehension of what they're doing, they don't. I already automatically, I'm like, oh, okay. You're one of them.
Or is doctor formulated, and then they show the guy in the white lab coat and glasses.
Or a doctor of chiropractic.
Yeah, we see that a few times.
Sorry, I'm not going to get started on that topic, but I think I've had to take down 2 companies in the past year that doctor formulated. You go search the doctor's name, and he's a doctor of chiropractic that's has his license revoked. Like you're not like you study spinal health, and even whether you go to a chiropractor or not, you're not a formulator, bro.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think this, and Jacob and I have talked about this a little bit too. My favorite thing to see in a company is just passion.
Oh, yeah.
And when that leaves, like when they get bought out by venture capitalists, or when they move into specifically, Jacob and I have talked about like a passionate company that brings in like a hard sales force that, then is then calling you for those invoices or whatever. It's sad to see that passion and drive leave the company and it become that business. And Will, you said you enjoy the business side of things. And I think it's fun to be around small to mid-level companies, because that passion is still in everything that you do. And at some point, a lot of companies become this, where it's like, we can just slap doctor formulated, or we can just give it to 8 outside sales reps and they just whore the shit out of it. And that takes all the fun out of it for me. I think the common theme that we all kind of talk about is the companies that really give a shit. Like Justin and I don't really give props to companies that are big corporate conglomerates anymore. I have to say one exception is this week. Dr. Rob Wildman from Dymatize keeps me very up to date with the studies that they're a part of. They donate a lot of Dymatize to colleges to do all sorts of different studies. This week, they released 2 studies on intermittent fasting, which were actually very interesting. I don't normally care for intermittent fasting, but for the most part, nobody really funds studies. Nobody really gives a shit. And it's hard sometimes to be positive about the industry. So when people like Will come out, it makes me at least a little happy.
And then I also want to say that whenever we're talking about, basically how science works, and the ability for companies to admit that, they may not have the best thing, it's kind of the opposite. It's kind of a contradictory statement compared to how usually like marketing of a product is done. It's basically the whole point of marketing a product is like that you want to convince the customer that like this is the best thing ever, and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I've always seen like a bit of a contradiction there. So I think that's probably why I've had more trouble with like marketing things. But I guess the way that I typically market things is just by like educating people. I mean, like I don't really feel comfortable with saying, like, oh, I have the best product ever, or like making those kind of statements. Even though like, I don't know, I think for most people, seeing so many big companies do well with that sort of business model, for most people, it probably doesn't take them that much to be able to buy into that, what the company is saying. But I don't know, it doesn't feel right to do so. And you're kind of
I think if you build your base correctly in terms of marketing, like if you build your base from a ground up with honesty, where you like have that consumer trust, right? And I guess get on, like, hey, I'm a human, you're a human. Science is a human study, right? And we're always changing. It's okay to be wrong. I don't know. I always like to use references of the past when we find out that something's not as beneficial as it used to be, or a product's not as good as I thought it was. I always like to refer to past references, like, hey, well, the arginine example, that used to, like, look, because I hear this every day in the retail store. Oh, well, and I guess being in South Carolina too, Will and I have touched on this before, kind of where I am and, the strong held beliefs that are around me. You don't trust that science. It's never right. They don't know what to make up their mind with. And I'm like, okay, well,
Oh my
So, like,
God.
that's my best South Carolinian accent right there. And you know, it's like, okay, well, that's the point, dude. Well, you know, we don't know something, so we're trying to find it out. And I think with marketing, if a lot of companies would start from the ground up with what you're doing, Will, and you know, trying to be real with people, hey, I would not be mad at you if you came out with a product tomorrow if we found out that, you know, half the ingredients in Ire aren't that beneficial, and you were like, hey, look, they weren't as great as we thought. Here's a reformulation.
Right.
And
that's kind of something that's you know, continues to be in the back of my head. Like for Ire, like, I mean, for the next run, I would like to include, like, you know, have another ingredient or something. Like, I've been thinking of possibly adding Arjuna in there, just because I know how beneficial it could be. Of course, the only issue may be price, and that might be a pricing ingredient. But I mean, even looking
going, no.
Yeah, and then I'll have to fight Justin and Brady on it. But I mean, even if the product is currently working, and like we have blood work to show that, you know, that people do see results from it, you know, we might be able to make it work even better. So
that's what I was going to ask you. Well, when are you going to get your PhD, man? Because it'll make it a lot easier to market your products if you're a doctor.
I don't know if the hundreds of thousands of dollars and 5 more years of schooling is worth adding those 3 letters at the end of an ad.
Well, I think that's one thing that, and I know this is something that Ben and I have talked endlessly about, is exactly what you were just saying. When we first started working with you and talking with you, knowing that about you, where you're like, hey man, I'm not comfortable marketing my products like this. So like, if you were to, you get these online marketers and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. And it's like, no, I mean, the guy, use his strengths, just let him do, you know, kind of his thing. It's just like where you've been able to grow without any of that bullshit, which is good. Because then I think then other companies can kind of see that as well. And then they go, okay, we don't necessarily have to do things this way easy either. And it sort of just will hopefully help things a little bit anyway.
Right. And I see, like a couple months before I figure out that you guys are doing the business consulting, I had a consultation with, like, it was recommended by my friend for some company that did advertising. And basically it was just like the same shit that like every other advertising company wants. You know, they're like, oh, we want you to do Facebook ads. We want you to set up a funnel, all this stuff. And like, you know, it's going to cost $10,000 the first month. And then from then on, like 8,000. I'm like, you do realize how much I make a month, right? It was just insane. And then like, so whenever I had the initial consultation with you guys, that you guys were kind of more aligned with my way of thinking, you know, and we thought, you know, right now is not a good time to be doing ads, funnels, all that stuff. And
we're like, no ads.
Like, look at the site, you know, of course it could be more professional, but like that's not really where, like, I don't really have enough customers coming that way to make it worth it right now. So just like things like that you guys pointed out, and kind of that I was already thinking of is another reason that you guys really stood out to me.
One of the beauties of like everything that we have at our disposal right now is that there's not just like, when you talk to a lot of digital advertising consultants, they have a pretty much like just a set template on how you should sell your product, right? You have Facebook ads that go to a funnel. It's a really fucking cringy landing page with user testimonials and the results and buy here now, and it auto applies, and I hate all of it. You know, I hate when I get served one of those. If I want to learn about your supplement facts panel and like I get sent to one of those landing pages, I already hate you. But it works really well. But I think one of the sad things about it is that like people who cling on to those kind of things to ensure their sales are just like people who clung onto wholesale or clung onto distribution for all of their income. And when Facebook advertising becomes expensive, you're not gonna be able to do it anymore. And that was all your income right there. So I think building that base, like Jacob said, is gonna be for everyone is the best idea, because you're not clinging on to any whatever, like service or something that could possibly run out. When you have a good like community around your product, like things don't crash unless you have some sort of stop, like, you know. And that's the biggest quarrel that I have with
digital marketers that
Mhm.
they bought their online course and they're now sending out the same Facebook pixel to all the people they're working with. Is there's too many call to actions and not enough call to culture, and that's kind of what comes back to my my whole base building mentality of like, I've spent the past 2 years making nonstop content for our store and for the brand, and so that when we get to the point of just a massive, and it's not if, when, when we get to that point, a call to action might be as much as, hey, have you guys heard of this? Right? Because, everybody already knows what's going on with our brand. Everybody already knows that you guys kind of get what I'm saying in that aspect. But yeah, so.
I think also the cool thing is that community becomes an asset. Like then when you need to create content for Facebook ads down the road or whatever service is available at that time, whatever we're talking about at that time, you have people who are willing to get in front of a camera or be part of a video shoot, or even if that Facebook ad saying like, join the TNS culture, be a meathead 10 at the show. Like if you gotta own it at some point.
I'm sorry, you shouldn't have put in in there. It's just cult apparently to people around here. But
yeah, at some point that becomes an asset that is important.
It already has for me. I mean, I have a guy. You guys might, if you scroll through the story, his name's Mike Hoy. He actually does all of our graphic design work on the back end with me. Like
is he the hiking guy?
He's the hiking guy. But he sends me these videos twice a week. He makes them. He doesn't ask anything of me. He just says, "Hey man, I threw a little promotion of something you sell in there on the back end. Let me know what you think." And that's an asset for me because I get to repost it and make somebody laugh.
Yeah.
And so and honestly, he just started out as a customer, and it definitely is cool. It becomes a weapon in your arsenal, so to speak. But
yeah, because there's a lot of companies. When they're sort of getting it, like the companies that capitalized on the overwhelming amount of Facebook ads and stuff like that, they're already doing it, and now they have enough money where you're not going to be able to really make a dent anyway. So they're sort of like this. The companies that are trying to sort of copy that style are really they're just wasting their time. It's like the one thing that like when we talk with Will, or one thing we noticed right about Will is, what he has unique is just himself. What he brings to the table is, no one could copy that. So it's like, man, why are we wasting so much money trying to trick people into, or getting lucky by hopefully someone seeing this, when you've got this amazing asset with these cool products right here? It's like, let's focus on that. Like, sure, that's a lot harder. It's a lot more complicated, but it ultimately, like I said, builds more of a foundation for the future. And then down the road, add in some ads and stuff like that, or, strategically place things. But there's too much of this rush where we're like, okay, cool, we're going to make a cool formula and then buy a bunch of Facebook ads and, everything's cool. And then that's why 97% of supplement companies fail. So
I think that a lot of companies have become standards. Like I've said before about Leviathan's, Tudka, like at a certain point, products become like, well, if you want me to take your product, you got to tell me why I'm not taking this, right? Like if I already know that Leviathan's Tudka works for me, why should I take yours instead? Like if this is a bastion or something, right? And I think that a lot of companies, if they like, instead of getting into business and then asking that question, if they ask themselves first, like, listen, you're going to make a pre-workout, why should I take yours instead of the 45 million out there? Like, I think we'd have a lot better products if they could actually answer that question.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, when I go into the store,
because Ben, who else's pre-workouts has two sexy dudes riding a rocket into the unknown abyss on it?
There you go. That works for me.
That works for me.
That works for me. I mean, honestly.
No, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, like if yours is, you're supporting a culture there, a community, right? Like, or something like that. I mean, if more people could answer that question honestly, I think we'd have a lot more productive time in this industry, and Justin and I wouldn't have spent so much time on negative things.
And I think that what you and I, we just, I know it's important to make sure that because I was having this conversation with someone else today. There was someone online today saying some really outlandish shit, and we're having this conversation about,
you don't say.
Right, this is really bad, and you're like, do you just stay out of it and try to focus on the positive, like Ben, what we talked about? Sometimes you just you just have to tell people like, shut the fuck up, like already with this. Like, where are you even coming up with this stuff from? But then you know what that turns into. I'm like, I'm already tired of that conversation that I haven't had yet. So we just sort of kind of fall back into the, well, let's stick to the positive stuff. It's not as mentally draining to try, because you're not going to change that person's opinion anyway. So it's like, where is that balance? And I know you and I.
Yeah, I think all four of us have dealt with this decision. You know, like whether or not you let these idiots know what they are. I put out that review on Sunday, and like I did it in the kind possible way I possibly could. Like I used as much lube as possible for that one, and I took off Monday because I was so stressed out from all of the messages I got Sunday. I had to deal with all of the messages and comments and calls and stuff. Sometimes it's not worth it, but sometimes people need to know, I think.
But you got a lot of like negative backlash for making that video.
I thought that was the best thing you did, man.
Yeah, I mean, it came across as respectful too. So
yeah, but I still end up dealing with a lot of, I don't know. I get a lot of negativity. Like, you guys ever look at like YouTube comments? Like that's like the worst comment section on the internet. Like it is. Like I can't look at my own comments sometimes, but like the private messages are even worse.
Oh my God.
But I mean, I don't know. I try to make the most informative content I can, but like Justin said, I try to stay away from negativity. Jacob does a good job with his TNS takedowns.
I'm lucky that I'm not I'm not a big company to where that could really get me in trouble. I think I hide under the gas or the mask or the umbrella of being a nobody still, you know, with content. So it's like, oh, I can call some big people out if I want to, because they're gonna be like, oh, who's this little fucker, you know?
Well, if you guys saw my video, I mentioned a really large athlete in that video that was sponsored by them, who like has a couple Sandows in his house, and he called me later that day to let me know that he had left the company. And so like it goes from like me presenting facts to possibly me affecting income, you know, and that's sometimes I have to realize I have a decent amount of influence, and it's kind of scary that you can, when you throw that around. So sometimes like I want to say I'm just presenting facts, but sometimes it's more than that, and that it can have repercussions. So sometimes a Facebook comment or an argument can be more than that, which is a little scary.
And me being in the brick and mortar space, I deal with more. I suppose you guys deal with a lot of keyboard warriors, that kind of type. I deal with a lot of the YouTube PhDs, and the guys between 18 to 25 who've watched Jeff Cavalier and Athlean X and everybody on YouTube, and they know a thing or two. And it's the I never want to come out and tell them, where the hell did you pull that from? Like where did that come from? But usually it just those kind of conversations, instead of me being a dick and letting my ego come out and start using big words that they probably don't understand, I'm just like, well, what makes you come to that conclusion? And they're usually, and that usually stops it. I haven't had to deal with anybody with messages though. Nobody's kind of, I don't know, maybe it's different.
You'll find a stalker eventually.
Your content is just so happy, dude. Like, it's hard to be mad.
Yeah, how could you?
It's really hard to get mad at anything you say, because it's like all like smiles and just mustaches and stuff. Like,
hey man, do not hate on the statue.
But I think honestly, I think one of the issues is that everyone a lot of people have a lot of theoretical knowledge. Like a lot of, on paper, a lot of people are right, but like the problem with the supplement industry is it doesn't always add up like that. You got really bad manufacturing out there. You have ingredients that don't test out. You like, no matter how much you are book smart, you can be missing a huge topic in this industry if you don't understand the actual application of it. Like we talked about arginine a little bit. Like, I'm a huge fan of arginine alpha ketoglutarate. Like, if you actually can get AAKG, I think it's a pretty good ingredient. The problem is you can't get it. No matter what your contract manufacturer tells you, you're not actually getting real arginine alpha ketoglutarate. So like your YouTube PhDs coming into your store, they might absolutely be correct, but like, in reality, they're probably very small and don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, it's usually more of they don't have a real sense of knowledge. They believe that because they got information from someone who they perceive to have knowledge as that being factual, so like, oh, well, I saw Jim Stepani say this, this, and this, or, sorry for dropping names, but, a good example, and like, okay, well, not exactly, man. So yeah.
Speaking of doctors, well, that's the other thing.
Yeah, speaking of doctors.
Ben, we did a podcast with Chris Waldron today, and we said the same thing about how, you have studies and things like that, and it's always all on one ingredient in some sort of setting, but then you take a pre-workout that's got 17 ingredients in it, and we don't know what all those, things do. Do they stop each other? Do they interfere with each other? Do they amplify each other? Do they do this? It's like, well, and a lot of it is like what you're saying. It's like a theoretical industry where we're just like, hey man, like, what'd you feel? And you're like, I don't know, man. Like, what'd you feel? And we're like, okay, cool. Like, we agree that's a good ingredient. And like, that's like the extent of it sometimes with how far we go with it.
But one of the bros has had one meal that day. The other bros had 7 clean meals. One slept for 8 hours. The other slept for 4. Like when I was at Supply Side last year, I was at a dinner with Nutrition 21, and they were presenting that new citrulline versus nitrosamine study that when I presented, you had all those calls about, Justin. And
yes, thank you for that.
Yeah. And so it's hilarious because like I'm like sitting at the table, like we're having dinner, and they're presenting this, and they tell us all the information. And it's like, yeah, citrulline does this much and nitrosamine does this much, and they're really similar. So we're going to say that they have about the same reaction, even though nitrosamine you're taking 1.5 grams, citrulline malate you're taking 8 grams. And like my hand just raised up, and I was like, why didn't you take both of them? Like,
right?
You already had all
so
of these people.
Close.
Yeah, you already had all of these people. They were taking all these, like you had the wash-up period was on everything. Like, why didn't you just have them take both? Just for one workout. Just humor me on this. Why didn't you do that? And they were like, that's a good idea. We should do that. Like, why am I like I don't like I went to school for dietetics. Like I've been in labs. Like, but I'm not. I don't think I'm that smart. Like, why is it me that's thinking of this? I'd like to see more studies with multiple ingredients. The problem is it doesn't make money.
Oh yeah, for sure, right? I was gonna ask Will, since you went to UCLA, right? Like, did you get into did you get into any of that stuff? Like, did they do any kind of studies or anything like that when it comes to like using supplements or anything?
I imagine they do, but like me personally, I didn't. Like, I wasn't really into research. But I mean, I know UCLA is big for research. Supplements, I'm not too sure about.
I've always imagined that like the researchers at these colleges like have so much bigger problems to solve. Like you're like, I want to find out if this will give me a pump, and they're like,
the researchers at college. I mean, I went to an R2 school, and I conducted a little bit of undergrad research. It wasn't like in laboratories because obviously R2 it's more practical stuff. And all of the actual researchers were more concerned with what their GAs and their, understudies were doing than the actual, outcome of the study. It was more about writing off information and passing it up the line so these GAs and these people who are doing the paper could move up a level and get their PhD. And that's what I noticed anyway. So it kind of makes me wonder, I'm like, who's actually the one with the main interest in this? Is it the
right? Because I know, Ben, we get a lot of questions about it, and people are like, well, what about these industry funded studies and stuff and brands? It's like, well, what else do you think is going to happen? Like,
you think science is just going to fall out of the sky? Like,
right? They're not going to take perfectly healthy people and spend money on these big studies,
right?
For shits and giggles. It's going to be someone that wants to prove something that's beneficial for them, of course. Right. So it's like, okay, that's when we need to take a look at the methods and stuff.
Well, like even if it is funded, right? What is the company funding? Are they buying the entire team of research? Like, do they have that kind of cash flow, or are they just literally donating a lump sum to a college and saying, "Hey, we want to be able to help you with this, with your hypothesis"?
Well, Jacob, your favorite ingredient got beat up again pretty bad today. S7 took a beating on our podcast, and
oh, please don't say favorite and S7 in the same sentence as me, man. I can't.
Can we hash this out? Like, can we actually do this right now? Because like I am so split on S7. I like because
Why,
like
Ben? You've read the study.
I've read it, but I've also taken it, and I really enjoy taking it. Like I've taken it pure, and I think it works. Like,
how dare you?
Yeah, it's just, but it's so frustrating. Like, because I don't like it, but I enjoy taking it. You know, like I'm like, it's like don't do as I say, not as I do. You know, like because when I do these breakdowns on them, I'm like, listen, guys, the science doesn't add up on this one, but it gives me a pump.
Yeah.
You know, and
I'm so confused.
Oh, my man over it. My he's not the rep for Alpha Line anymore. He moved on to
Waxon.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Ryan basically he would always tell me, listen, Jacob, because he knew he would just say it to get on my nerves because I'd already beat him up about F7 enough. And he's like, look, man, I'm gonna send you a free bottle of Gaines candy and take 2 in the morning with your coffee and then go have sex with your girlfriend. It's gonna be the best thing ever. And I'm like, wait, like what? That's the most bro testimony I've ever heard. Did I try it?
Right, I was waiting to get
Tune in next time on Roundtable for more.
Because I was gonna say, Ben and I we're doing our own independent studies of
Lepidamax. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, Lepidamax. My hormones are not good right now, and Lepidamax, if it's working for me, like Justin, I think has a handicap. Like Justin already has a healthy testosterone count right now, but like I'm going through a pretty serious restart right now, and Lepidamax is exhibiting some side effects for me. So I don't know. I believe in maca, but
yeah, they're on to something with that for sure. So anyway,
well, S7. I really want to know what Will thinks of S7 because
I want to go back a little. I haven't looked, like basically the only like significant form of like reading that actually seemed to be worth my time was what Robert from Supplement Engineer, I think he posted it in the SupplementSnoop group one time, just breaking it down as well as he could, which was basically just saying like the chemicals that were responsible for those like increased blood flow and pump benefits from the ingredient were like the form of flavonoids that were found in those vegetables. So then like I think I responded to that. I'm just saying like, why don't they just make an ingredient that uses more of those flavonoids instead of just like using like whole spinach and like all this other nonsense. But I don't know. I mean, at least it seems like that is the way that it works. It's just it is a really weird ingredient otherwise, and everything else that I've seen doesn't really do a very good job at explaining why. But I mean, I guess they don't really need to do that because they sell plenty of it for some reason.
Well, it's a cheap and it's small dose. You don't need a lot of it, and it has a decent amount of buzz behind it. I don't know. There's certain people in the industry that if they value something, I realize this is like kind of not scientific at all, but like I genuinely appreciate Drew Peters's opinion on things, and if he's willing to put it in a pre-workout that's a pretty small serving size, doesn't have a lot of other things going on, it means it holds some value to me. He put it in Mr. Bain's, and I thought Mr. Bain's is a pretty good formula when I tried it out. But I haven't seen S7 in a lot of other really great products outside of maybe Superhuman for Alpha Lion, but that's a loaded formula. Like if like 50 milligrams out of that whole dosage, if that was bunk, like we really wouldn't notice. So that's why
like, and you're like, I don't hate S7, right? I'm not going to go out of my way to talk shit about it. But also, like, I'm not going to sell my products with the sole selling point of, dude, this has S7 in it. Can you believe it? Like, you know? Like,
well, I think I asked, it was Ben from Morphogen. I asked him one time, we were talking about S7. He said there's a couple ingredients that he said the same thing. He's like, we were talking about Spectra too, because I was trashing Spectra
That's where I was going to go next.
Yeah,
So,
I was trashing that one. Well, they're kind of along the same lines, and I don't say trash it. I was just it's kind of a weird thing that they're doing with something that's kind of cool, you know, at the same time. But he's like, I'll never like hinge my formula on it. He goes, but if I can squeeze something else into that product for someone, maybe he goes, I know these ingredients all do something. They're all going to help you. He's like, and if I can put this in there, he goes, can I guarantee it's going to help you? No. He's like, but I'm not going to leave it blank. He goes, so I'll fit that in there. He's like, and if it gives you something extra, cool. If it doesn't, I'm not going to raise the price of my product. He's like, it's going to be the same anyway. So it's like kind of that approach. Sometimes you'll see, like, I think what you're saying, Jacob, is you're like, S7 is in here. And then if you look around it, you're going, well, that can't be it, right? It's kind of like the same thing with like Spectre is the way I feel is if Spectre is too much of the, you know, like if Spectre is in something cool, that's fine, you know what I mean? But if it's like what we're talking about, I'm kind of like, well, I think we can do better than that. So I'm with you there.
my whole thought on S7 is like that they really hinged all of these buzz off of, what is it, 231% increase in nitric oxide?
Yeah, 230. I'm on their website and I'm like, okay, well, like all these claims that are on the side panel, it's so sketchy. You know, like 230% increase in NO, clinically tested, plant-based, small dose. Like,
might as well say keto on it.
It's ironic because it's like you don't see these kinds of claims from ingredient companies normally. Like you see that kind of claim from like Muscle Tech. You know, like it's like they're selling it. I mean, this is something when I help out ingredient companies, I kind of reference Compound Solutions and kind of talk about how like you need to become a B2C company, even though you are B2B. Like you need to make your product a household name, or like a locker room name is really kind of what I call it. And I think they're doing a good job with S7. Like I have to give them kudos in their marketing. But and this is my bastardization of science, so I'm not the person really to be saying this, but if 231% is what they could get out of elderly patients that were not training, if they were able to get 100% increase in trained individuals that are young, like that's still a significant increase in nitric oxide. And I would much prefer to put that on a bottle. I'd feel better about that. And in my reviews, I'd feel better about it. And I honestly do believe that there is some sort of increase for a trained individual that's young and healthy like myself, but I can't make that claim because the study has elderly patients.
And it also goes back into, you know, synergy between ingredients, right? Like you know, what if we're taking S7 alone versus if we're taking it with 7 grams of citrulline and, you know, glycerize or any like sodium, whatever we're adding in there. How is it affecting the bolus of ingredients, you know?
Yeah. So and I think Robert has talked a lot about it, which Justin can touch on more and Will probably understands way better than I would, but the way that it works, training would theoretically negate a lot of it because of the free radicals you're creating or the damage that you're creating. I'm not 100% up to date on it, but if they had been working out, it could have really brought down the amount of nitric oxide that was produced or something like that.
Yeah. My whole stance on that is like, I'm not anti, like, notice I'm just asking questions about it. Like, I'm more like, okay, well, if it does help with free radical, you know, reduction or whatever, is 50 milligrams an adequate dose? Like, do we know?
Yeah. Like, I think that's one of the kind of the deals behind it is because nitric oxide it dies off so quickly. It's such a short. So if the antioxidant effects or whatever from S7 can somehow, you know, extend the life a little bit, maybe then you sort of have a, you know, kind of an application for it. But I don't know, like, Will, this kind of plays in, because I was going to ask you something anyway, Will, because we always talk about a lot of studies and research and stuff like that. And I didn't know, because I know you're into science and stuff like that. Is there like things that you see, like talking about the S7 study, that where you see that sort of makes you cringe when you see some like of these studies? Or is there, being that you do so much research like in these things, or is there like things that you look for that stand out to you, good and bad, like when you see a lot of these studies come out?
I mean, I guess it's good that it was actually conducted in humans and not rats, because I mean, I've seen trademarked ingredients before refer to rat studies, and like they literally use that for marketing. But I actually didn't know it was in elderly, untrained individuals. I just remember that 230% claim. So yeah, I don't know the full details of the study, like what were these elderly individuals doing? Where
it was like 8 people too, wasn't it? It was like
okay.
It was a really small group of people.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it would be better with a larger number of test subjects, and then, preferably people
Training.
who are, if they want this to be a product that's like a pre-workout or something that someone's using for training, it would make more sense to use an age group that's going to be into that more, someone like from their 20s to 40s or whatever. And then, of course, if they were a trained individual, the results, like Ben was saying, there would be much more substantial and much more useful for the product that they're aiming for. But I mean, it seems like it's possible that they could have knew that making those more like truthful alterations could have affected their numbers negatively. So it could be that they chose elderly people because they knew that was going to give them the biggest raise in nitric oxide, and then they can use that claim for marketing. And they don't have to put the details about, oh, it was only 230% in an elderly population. They can just slap 230% on the label, and of course that's what the majority of people see whenever they go to buy the product. So that's, it's going to get the point across to them, and they're not going to really, like, most people don't question, like, okay, how did this number come up with? And like what are the more finer details that was used to come up with this number.
So, and I guess that's like you're kind of already answering the question, but when you're looking, because I know that you're looking into some ingredients that no one else is using, and what is like the criteria you look for that like really gets your attention, that you're like, I'm comfortable like moving forward with this to put this like in a product?
I think the biggest one would be if there's actual like human clinical studies showing a result. I mean, something like an animal study, a rat study, is always a good way to start and say, like, okay, maybe what we're thinking of does have some plausibility. But like, for example, in the case of pterostilbene, compared to resveratrol, there's plenty of rat studies with pterostilbene being effective at like improving cholesterol levels, being an effective antioxidant, and that sort of thing. But there's only a couple human clinical studies done, and the human clinical study that they did for it, I think it actually raised people's cholesterol or impacted it in a negative way. So that was definitely an interesting result. That if you would have just gone with the rat study that showed the improvement, you technically may have got it wrong, unless there was some sort of finer details in that human study that we can suggest that there was actually an error that occurred, and that the raise in cholesterol may not necessarily happen whenever people are taking pterostilbene. But I mean, so far the data in humans suggests that it might not be the end all be all replacement for something like resveratrol, even though the rat studies seemed convincing. And also, for me, also looking at the molecular structure. So for pterostilbene, like the claims in bioavailability, just the fact that there are some alterations in the chemical structure compared to resveratrol, that gives a reason for it to have more bioavailability, but also keeps the functional group in resveratrol that is responsible for the way that it binds to genes and tissues and that sort of thing. That's still intact on that molecule. So like if I were to just go by the structure of pterostilbene and then look at those things, I would think that it could be beneficial in humans. But usually in most cases you always need a human clinical study to kind of confirm things like that.
See, and that's why I stay in my lane right there.
And on my lane, the FDA now doesn't allow you to use animal claims at all. You're not allowed to it could be a fucking primate study that is like 99% the same genetics as us, and you can't use that claim. So I think, just to tie this back to another conversation we had before, Jacob talked a little bit about if industry funded studies and conflicts of interest. One of the reasons I've never really cared too much about that is because, like what Will just said, like if you actually read the study, you should be able to look at the methods and see if there was something that would have thrown off the data. There definitely have been people, Jacob Wilson, who have played with studies to make things look a certain way. But it's usually pretty obvious if you look at the study. I don't have to really look at the conflict of interest and like run off of that. I mean, I guess there are some, well, maybe you could talk a little bit about, and I'm sure there are some ways you could mess with data a little bit to make it look good without really being obvious. But for the most part, I've never really had a problem with industry funded studies because of what Will just said. Like, you can go in and look at the actual study and see whether or not you appreciate the data.
Right. And I mean, of course, that's another reason why it's so important to not just read the abstract, to really go through the full study, look at the materials and methods. Like, that's the most important part, because it's going to tell you exactly what method they used for the study, what dosage the people were taking, when they took it, how many people were involved in the study, and all that stuff, which is crucial to, finally drawing a reasonable conclusion, in just about any form of research.
So we have a question that has kind of brought up a thought process for me that I want to bring up a little bit. One of the cool things, Will, that because you actually come from science, I feel like you definitely you feel like you have a responsibility to create products that help people. And one of the things that I've seen with a lot of formulators, consultants, researchers right now is they feel some sort of personal responsibility to do something with the whole coronavirus COVID-19 thing going on. Obviously, it can be extremely irresponsible or unethical to be doing anything with supplements in that area. Mm-hmm. There's currently a boom of immune products. How do you?
I've been seeing all of that.
There's been some good ones. There's been some wrong ones. I've touched on a few, like NutriBios and Alpha Lines. I think are solid in what they are claiming and what they put together. There are definitely some overreaches I have seen. How do you feel about immune products in general, and then also in today's issue going on?
Like how effective they would be?
Yeah, I like you. My understanding is you actually do like over-the-counter prescription type stuff, like
a little bit. The place I work at, they're actually working on obtaining an OTC drug license, but we because OTC drugs. There are some like topical creams, like sunscreen, for example, is an example of an OTC drug. Also, things like Bengay. So we're more looking at releasing those products just because they're easier to make. But I mean, of course, understanding like drug mechanisms and everything, how they work, has always been something that's interesting to me. But I mean, as far as like immune support and everything, there is solid evidence that like certain classes of compounds are effective at helping to boost your immune system. But I mean, of course, I think these things will all kind of play a minor role, and the most important thing is going to be exercising regularly, getting enough sleep, having a good diet. Those should really be what you are looking at to be the most important. And then from there you can pick up some extra supplements or something, some extra antioxidants if you want to. But, I don't think taking a certain supplement just by itself is going to prevent anyone from getting the flu, not necessarily coronavirus. If they happen to touch something that has the flu on it and then get it entered into their system, it's not really going to be too effective at preventing something like that from happening.
It's been a really touchy subject recently. I have gotten into like a few conversations about like whether or not it's ethical to release these kinds of things.
Oh, go ahead, man. Sorry.
I was going to ask, like, Justin, have you talked to anyone off of this, or like, what has been because behind the scenes, like, I'm kind of like, careful. If you're going to do this, careful.
Yeah, because actually the entire Q&A that I did over at Compound Solutions today was sort of around immunity supplements, and I got a lot of questions like, what do you do for immunity? What is this? And I was there, or what do you take for immunity? And I was like, well, I make sure I'm sleeping, and this and that. I was like, I know that's not what you want to hear, but exactly like what Will was just saying. I said, yeah, there are some things that you can sort of tack on, around there, maybe as some sort of extra support. Like, anytime you can sneak in some vitamin D, those are things like if I'm going to use something for, say, immune system, I want it to be things that have other benefits as well. Like, getting with where everyone's like, oh, just start taking your, this and that. It's like, well, if the sole purpose of that ingredient is for like immunity, I don't really put much stock into it. But if it's like, okay, zinc or, you know, vitamin D, stuff like that, it's like, okay, there's multiple things that this can help out with.
Most people should have already been taking vitamin D the whole,
Exactly.
the whole time.
Yeah.
That's a mass a global deficiency.
100%.
Yeah. I was gonna say, even though so I was talking with Dan and Josh over at NutriBio 2 days ago, and I was basically making a piece of content for them. They ended up posting it on the page, and we had to be so utterly specific to not make any claim whatsoever.
Sure.
Like even the fact that I said the word COVID-19, and I think I said something about vitamin C having a somewhat correlated reduction in cold symptoms. Like they were like, nope.
Don't even go down there.
It was basically me running down the ingredients, like saying like, okay, so this is linked to a X, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are companies that are doing it right, obviously.
Yeah. That's that whole, that role-playing thing that Tim Gritzman does, Ben, over at Natural Body. He goes, okay, say you're a person over there, way over there, and say that person was going to have this. I'm not saying it's me, and I'm not saying it's this, and I'm not saying it's this, I'm not going to do this, but say you're that person. It's like a whole role-playing thing you have to do.
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
Well, if it's going on over there somewhere.
It's tough because I'm lucky in my platform. I'm not selling products, so I can be a little bit more liberal with my claims or things I talk about. Like I've brought up the fact that like in hospitals, they're like mega dosing vitamin C right now, like grams every few hours, and it seems to be helping out a lot. But like, just be healthy. I don't know.
Right.
I already took 10,000 IUs of vitamin D.
Make that a shirt. If we continue that, we need to make
just fucking sleep, dude.
Be healthy, damn it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of we did a whole thing about like doing things on social media and how do people being successful on social media, and literally like we're just like, just be fucking normal. Like just be normal. All right. Just be normal. Like be healthy, be normal. Crazy shit, right? Like
yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, the one we talked about this 2 weeks ago. The one cool thing that has come out of this is Epicor becoming more known. Epicor is one very interesting ingredient that has a cool background, showing what it can do. The story behind it is very. It's a cool like small American business story, but I normally don't really give a lot of claims to these kinds of things, but like Epicor does have it backed. So that was one interesting ingredient that I actually did give props for. But outside of that, like the best formulas I've seen from these are like vitamin D, vitamin C, mushrooms.
That's another good topic. With bringing in, we brought in Super Shroom today. I'm very intrigued, and I love that Joey didn't put any claims on the label.
So I'm still waiting because I know the breakdown of Pico 2 and I know the breakdown of Super Shrooms, and I'm waiting on if I'm allowed to put it out there. It's very similar, but like to give you an idea, I prefer Super Shrooms, knowing what's behind it.
Yeah, the Super Shroom breakdown's pretty cool. I don't know if we're allowed to say it or not. I didn't ask him if it was cool, but it's like people, and I'll say this too, and I know Ben, you know this. My first reaction to Super Shrooms is I was like, oh, well, they found a slightly different version of Pico 2 that they could just make cheaper. And they were like, actually, no, it's more expensive. And I was like, that's interesting. And then it's much more expensive. And it's also a really, really good, solid breakdown of what is all in there. It's not, 99% one thing and then, sprinkled in. It's actually really good.
It's like not 99% of one thing. Like it's like
the total opposite of that.
Yeah, like if you catch our drift, like it's very good. And I don't know. I'm not a mushroom guy. I've never been like I think lion's mane is cool. I almost got into that for a little bit, but like I can't take 2 grams of it. Like, and I don't want to take a whole bunch of pills of it. So like I never got into it. Like for me, it's like ease of taking it every day. Like I already take so many supplements. I really don't want to add more to it. But I actually got into this, and I'm gonna give it a full run and see how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I don't know, like companies like Leviathan or Glaxon, I'm like much more willing to go out of my way because I think that they have interesting products. I Especially like the less marketing claims that you have, the more intrigued I am.
Oh, that's me all across the board. And like literally, like, and I have this concept. I've probably talked to one of you guys before about it. Like, if we ever come out with something that steps outside of our little house brand, like it's going to be even more simple than the most simple. Like what Brandon's doing over at Unnamed. Like we're gonna make it even more simple than that. But speaking on that, like the less marketing claims you can make, the better, right? For me, because as a retailer, people trust what we're going to tell them about the product, not all the crazy jargon they read on the product.
Yeah.
Plus, you're probably going to have to change at some point.
Yeah. So
we had a phase at Mutual where we pretty much pulled all real claims off the bottle, like no more skin splitting pumps and all that kind of stuff, and it became very, in my opinion, it became that the panel was the marketing claim, like I'm looking at DHA right now, like the HPLC lab tested for potency. That's the claim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's actually pure, which is, I don't know, to me, it's sexier than like telling me what DHA is going to do.
I like it.
So I think it's an interesting.
How do you dose your DHEA, man?
My doctor tells me what to take.
Okay.
But I take what is this, 25 milligrams first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was any way to prevent possible conversion to the bad hormone versus.
I have no idea why I'm taking it. He took my blood work and told me to take it, and I'm going to the same doctor as Sean Roden in Gastichino, so like I kind of just blindly trust this guy. Like if he's willing to take care of Sean Roden, I'm like, tell me what to do, bro. He has me taking so much fish oil because apparently he started talking about how fish oil is like the most underrated muscle builder, and I was like,
okay.
I mean, like the people that come in here,
you had me at muscle builder.
Yeah, sure. Like
and even the efficacious doses on fish oil that companies won't let you know about. Like you need to be taking more than 12 grams a day, like a lot more than your 3 little pills that you're having with breakfast.
I'm going through an insane amount.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the DHEA has always really intrigued me just because I know that there's a 50-50 conversion in the body. Typically, I don't really know what determines those factors, but like testosterone to estrogen, I've always just been curious about it as a supplement for a multitude of uses.
My catchphrase on this kind of stuff has always been go to your doctor. Like if you think like DHEA is right for whatever your hormone problem is, like you probably should talk to your doctor first. And so that's what I did. But I think after this is all over and I see the difference in my blood work, I'll probably verify afterwards and try to figure out. But like, I don't know, I'm kind of weird. Sometimes I like to try things without like knowing what the mechanism of action is. Like if someone knowledgeable tells me what is going to do something, I kind of like when we did Flight, Justin. By all means, Will, you should look into Flight by Glaxon. I think
please break that down for me, somebody.
I've heard Joey, talk about a little bit on the Supplement Engineer podcast. It sounds very interesting.
It's very interesting.
I was gonna say I did like 2 10-minute long videos about it and I don't think I said anything. Like I'm like trying to explain it, and I'm like I don't know. Like I'm just.
It shouldn't work. All the science shows that like colostrum shouldn't work, but because it's in these special pills, like it might deliver it better.
Yeah, I know Joey's big with the DR caps.
Yeah.
And
I'm all in.
In terms of recovery, like in terms of growth hormone, like there's really only so far you can go naturally. And like, I know what it's like to, not, and like Flight worked really well for me, like I was killing myself in the gym, like on leg day and walking the next day. I am notorious for like hamstring cramps and like just DOMs out the ass for my hamstrings. Like I was like squatting ridiculous amounts of weight for reps and walking the next day. Like I could throw anything at my training session, and Flight would just be like, fuck it, you're cool. It doesn't make sense, but not a lot of Glaxon makes sense.
Right.
So I think I don't know. That's an exciting time for me. It's like when companies can kind of defy the science, because so often,
I mean, like they create a new avenue for research to be conducted. Like, hey, here's this product, here's this combination. let's go check the synergy. Let's go check, like there is definitely a,
That's exactly what they're saying too. What Joey said in that podcast when we were talking about flight, he's like, we know what we've done. He's like, we are really confident in what we did. He goes, but we're not saying like, here it is, everyone. This is it. This is the one that you've been waiting for this whole time. They're like, how can we make this better? Because now we've got it out there, and now people are responding well to it. And they're like, that did work like we had hoped and thought. Now what do we do? Like, oh, if we got that to work, let's do this. And they're always thinking like, how do we keep pushing forward?
I've been fighting to get an ingredient for Joey that like is not available, but I know someone that makes it for themselves for a company that won't wholesale it out. And like I love this about Glaxon. Like they made a great product. They're like, let's go deeper. Like let's see how far we can take this.
Yep.
And so I think I don't know. I'm excited for that kind of stuff in 2020 because we've started to see a bunch of this. We've gotten away from I think like the influencer formulators and more into like you can make some really cool stuff. I mean, hell, High Tech made that IGF product for Blackstone. Like I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming.
I know Will's a big fan.
I told them I would try it. I would honestly I'd do it and go take blood work, but
I think Will beat the shit out of that thing.
Did he? I didn't see that one.
But they had two. They had IGF and don't they have like was the other one the GH one or something?
Yeah, it looked like a little Serostim kit. It was funny.
That says it all right there.
The ingredients in one of them was like just like how are you even making that comparison? It was just so ridiculous.
It was from like a whey concentrate immunoglobulin, right, or something like they were like isolating it or something.
It just seemed totally unrelated, but I mean, Blackstone has done some ridiculous shit before, so it didn't surprise me too much. And just seeing the price for that, I think it was like $249 or something. It's like, I mean, I guess they're really trying to appeal like the Muscle Tech ads of 10 years ago, where you can take Cell Tech and gain 40 pounds of muscle in 4 weeks.
Hey man, listen, that's what got my start, dude. First 50 pounds in 2 weeks. Cell Tech.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they took Justin's advice in creating more products at a higher price point for their same consumers instead of trying to find more consumers. You can't really hate on it, you know?
Right? They're like, well, screw it. If they're willing to buy this shit that doesn't work for 60, let's up it to 220 and see what happens.
Let's make it work even less and then up it at the same time. It's
wow. Like, that worked. Wait until the next one comes out.
They're all just sitting around sipping whiskey, just laughing at people, probably just like.
I mean, Justin and I have joked about this too. Like the stuff that you could put together and sell on Amazon and make a ridiculous amount of money. Like, if you know, like writers have like ghost names that they write under. Like, if I feel like if I could make a company under a fake name and sell some stuff, it's pretty tempting. The stuff that you can get away with, you know.
Well, and I think too, like there's certain dosages of certain ingredients. You get certain ingredients have such huge ranges of claims that you can make. Is it anything substantial for anybody? But you could still, use these small dosages and make some kind of claim to it because there is this, obscure study that there's something, out there. And it is, I mean, you can see how people can kind of get into it and they're like, oh, well, I can do this and still sort of, put things on labels, and you're still technically right, even though when you really, like you said, you look at the methods and stuff like that, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, at the same point, I think when you really know what you're doing with ingredients, you don't need to megadose everything. Like I keep going back to this with specimen. I honestly, I think they could use half of that blend, make it really cheap, and it would still kick people's ass. A lot of people are just. I had this talk today with. Forget where it was on Facebook. You were there, but about GBB. Like GBB probably just depletes your electrolytes and just makes you sweat. But customers want to sweat.
Yeah.
So if they want to sweat in their cardio, give them something to sweat in their cardio. If that's going to give them a better experience, and this is kind of where I start to differ a little bit from the real scientists. But like, if that's what a consumer is looking for, if they're looking for that experience and you can provide that, that's a valuable product for a lot of people.
We had a really, really good conversation with Chris Waldron today about formulating. You know, he's like, you know, there's this puzzle you're putting together where you want certain ingredients that people will feel and give them that feeling that this is work, especially when you're talking like a pre-workout or a fat burner or something like that. It's like not like a health-based product, but you know, and then there's, you know, people are like, okay, this is going to look cool to someone, maybe it's helpful to them, but then you're going to put in the ingredients that really do it. And there's sort of like this puzzle that different brands use a different formula of, you know, making it look good on the label, but also doing this. And so that's where you sort of kind of see this. It was interesting because he was talking about how he's formulated some of his newer products. He was talking about FSU for a long time today, and talking about how, you know, when it comes to price, he's like, you know, I really wanted to use this, but I can't use this. He's like, because if I use this, I literally can't sell it to anyone. And then that doesn't do us any good. We were having a whole conversation about how it's great that you can mega dose of shit out of everything. But then if you can't distribute it to anyone, then congratulations, you have the coolest product in the world sitting in your living room because you can't sell it to anybody and nobody's going to buy it. So it doesn't help anyone anyway. So it's like this whole interesting dynamic of what the brands and manufacturers sort of go through in order to bring a good quality market, but also make it, you know, available for anyone.
I think, and definitely, I think Will probably will have a little bit to say on this. Maybe there's like, you find out what works, and you also, in my opinion, you usually try to scale it back. Like, what's the minimum I need to elicit all of these results? Like with training, that minimum required volume to make gains, just anything on top of that, you're just beating yourself up. And so something that works extremely, I think one of the cool things about Will's products is that most of them are backed by blood work. But we don't really see that with pre-workouts or intra-workouts. You see gains over time, but like when you're able to quantify it on blood work, that's really cool. So like, I mean, I have to ask, like, well, when you were formulating it, were you using like dummies? Like, were you having people take it and taking their blood work, or like, was there a fine tuning process to creating a lot of your products?
For most of them, it's just that those kind of results were already there in studies in humans. So, you know, we have ingredients like, for instance, Tudka. I mean, what's weird to me is that there's still bodybuilders who are convinced that like Tudka doesn't work or something like that. Just like literally just go on like PubMed or whatever and look it up. Like there's probably like hundreds of studies of Tudka showing before and after results of people's liver enzyme values recovering significantly with its use. And just the fact that UDCA is also literally prescribed for people who have liver cholestasis, is, you know, people should kind of be able to put two and two together. But yeah, I mean, most cases, if there is a well-documented study that has taken place in humans, it's usually enough for me, unless I want to make it, unless I want to do something a little bit differently. Because I mean, I could give, you know, a sample to a friend or something and say, hey, take this for 4 weeks. But even if I did that, you know, it's very unlikely that I'm going to be able to control and monitor those results as closely as they did in a study, you know, where things are much more closer regulated. So right. If there are studies there and they're solid studies, I think that's a very good place to be able to derive that information from.
Yeah, I actually honestly really think that these kinds of products are even more like sensitive when you add in multiple compounds, like glucose disposal agents, health products, stuff like that. Like pre-workouts, you're going to get a pump and you kind of move stuff around. But like with glucose disposal agents, Justin and I both right now, well, I don't know if you're doing it, but I'm tracking with Alpha Line's GDA. And we have 4 different options. And it's vastly different depending on which one we're taking, which I think is very interesting. And you don't get that with pre-workout. You don't get that with just some flashy product. That's stuff. I mean, like I've had like all of the variables great for a pre-workout and still had a shitty pump. Like things are off sometimes. If you're psychologically off, it doesn't happen. But you can't argue with like a blood glucose test. You just can't.
Right. Numbers are numbers at the end of the day.
Yeah. I've had some weird numbers from a finger prick, but like you can always recreate it. I'm trying to get a CGM right now. I don't know if you guys have ever done
Yeah,
that.
I haven't. They asked me if I was, because it's the same kind of thing. You sort of run into that where it'll fluctuate a little bit. Because what I wanted to do is because the alpha lion thing was so interesting to me. Because like you were saying, I'm like, well, how different can it be? And it really was different in those different testing we're doing. So actually, then I went and bought cheap again, and I actually have Morphogen's Prime. So it's been like a little laboratory of blood sugar monitoring. Like, and here's shit all over the place.
I actually have a Google sheet from every glucose disposal test I've ever done in the last year for this industry. And it is so cool to kind of well, this one got here. Like, it's very interesting to see well, because especially when you add in DR caps from Glaxon, and then I also have berberine versus dihydroberberine. Each one is a little bit different, and it's I'm excited for GDAs in 2020. I think it's going to open up a little bit more, whether or not Justin Hall likes it.
No, I think it'll be good because people will take it more seriously, and then you can get real, like what we're doing. You're taking it to the level you're supposed to be taking it to, whereas it's not this, because when you take a glucose disposal agent or an IR, I don't want the feedback you give me when you take a pump product or pre-workout. What'd you feel, man? I don't know, I liked it. It's like, well, it doesn't okay, super helpful, but if you can look at real tangible results, and then we know how things are in the industry. Like, very rarely are these supplements the only things that people are taking. So when someone says, look, this improved my blood work, it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, no offense to the other people out there, but I don't know. But if I can do it myself, then I know exactly sort of what's going on. So anytime we can take it deeper, it's always a good thing. I like it.
Yeah, I want more answers in terms of the AMPK versus mTOR with berberine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It seems like right now for berberine, that's the biggest potential drawback. So yeah, I mean, I do too. I would love to see more research be done about that. But in terms of berberine, it seems like berberine is still going to be a better choice to use than metformin. It seems like metformin lately has had quite a bit of negative connotations with it. And because this is another thing that you should probably consider whenever you look at studies, because all the studies previously that have been done on metformin have been done on people who are diabetics. So, obviously someone's metabolism who's a diabetic already versus a healthy individual are going to be different. So maybe those negative effects that were happening with metformin in the diabetic individual are not large enough to have an actual negative effect. And kind of like the positives outweigh the negatives in their case. Whereas if you have a healthy individual taking the same dose of metformin, the negatives may actually be enough in that case to outweigh the positives. And it seems like that may be the case.
Yeah, I drilled Sean Wells about it. He's kind of the berberine guy, and his answer was kind of funny. It was like, listen, it's not as simple as berberine is good, metformin is bad. Even when you get into the turning off mTOR and turning on AMPK, it's not as simple as you're not building muscle now, you'll be building muscle later. It's way more complicated than that. And for people to completely dismiss one of these ingredients just because they heard it lowers mTOR is kind of asinine. It's much more complicated. But I think I did a little bit of experimenting with Joey's from Glaxon. He had a very interesting, I think he called it the Hunter protocol, because they would eat most of the day, and then you take a huge dose of cheat, and you fast through the night or something like that. And it was kind of interesting. I don't know. I just want to see more science on it. I think that it's definitely helping overall. One of the things that Justin has said, which Will kind of got into, is utilizing carbs better. What exactly does that mean? I know that the blood sugar in my blood is going down. I understand that, but are we actually, is it being shuttled into my muscles? Right? I mean, is it just helping me for health purposes, or am I actually building more muscle because of it? I don't know yet.
Right.
So In any case, we're rounding out on 2 hours now, guys. I saw Jacob's like dying, like he's starting to lose his
I'm
energy.
going catabolic over here. I mean, speaking of mTOR and AMPK, I mean, geez, I got to eat something, man. My anabolic.
Go get your chicken and rice then.
Hey, don't listen. Steak and rice tonight. All right. But yeah, interesting stuff on berberine though, and I do raise the question in summary, like when people say utilize nutrients better, or when people say improve nutrient partitioning. Okay, well, an improvement can mean a lot of things. Are we actually utilizing those carbs for glycogen? Whether muscle glycogen. It's
I
always
get triggered when people say they shuttle carbs. I'm like, that's fucking meaningless. Stop saying that.
I mean, what are we shuttling it to your liver where glycogen's also held? I mean, what are we?
Please, let's talk more.
Yeah. Well, Will brought up exogenous insulin a couple of times, which is like I don't get to talk about it too much. It's something I like to talk about, but like that is a significant way to shuttle carbohydrates. Like that is like a sledgehammer of glucose. Like
that's kind of my opinion on GDA. Is like,
yeah.
If someone wants to honestly ask me like what's a good GDA, I'll just be like insulin.
Yeah.
Like, are you talking about something that you can legally obtain, or do you just want to supplement? Because I mean, there's a better answer than insulin in that case.
It's really hard to, I don't know. I really kind of get annoyed when like big coaches preach like gummy bears post workout or something to spike your insulin. Like nothing you eat is going to do it that much. Like metformin isn't that strong.
Yeah.
So it's a pet peeve of mine.
They do that pre-workout. They have their clients do it pre.
Did I say pre? I guess post. I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always like, really, dude? Well, no. What amazes me that coaches are having their clients do that when the consistency and the consumption of their diet throughout the rest of the day and throughout the rest of the week is like still shit. They're like, oh, but make sure you get your gummy bears and your whey protein isolate post workout. Like that's your essential factor there.
Yeah.
Or they're leaving out the fact that they're also supposed to chase it down with 8 IUs of insulin post workout too.
Yes. So yeah, that's the big controversy. Is like everyone's like, well, Jay Cutler ate 200 grams of candy corn post workout. I'm like, well, Jay Cutler was also in the bathroom shooting a lot of insulin with it.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
You don't like candy corn is not anabolic. It's not the candy corn. So I that's a big concept that parallel of like taking something that worked because of drugs and thinking like if you remove the drugs it still works. Like it's not really the same. I think there is merit to the whole berberine concept. Mm-hmm. I think that it can be helpful, but let's not think that it has anything to do with that other concept of exogenous insulin.
And the problem with the way that these things are marketed, I know we need to hop off here, but the problem is that it takes people away from the overall main reason that body composition change can occur, right? The biggest factor, whether we want to nitpick it all day, is energy, energy balance. That's the largest factor. And the problem with a lot of these GDAs, when people don't understand, nutrition on a basic level, so this is going to help stop the carbs from turning into fat, and then I'm going to lose fat.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, de novo lipogenesis it hardly ever even occurs to begin with. So either you're just eating like a way too many calories. That's it. I think it's just misrepresented. So until we get to a point, that's why I love IRE. There's berberine in there, but there's no necessarily claims, like same thing with cheat. There's 750 mgs of it in there.
Well, if you look at the pyramid behind Jacob, it's a really good analogy for how this whole thing should work, right? Like, I don't know what the actual words are on it, but I can guess.
Energy balance, macronutrients, micronutrients, nutrient timing, and then supplements are at the very top.
Yeah. So what Will was saying earlier about your body's, blood glucose being ready for another meal. Yes, berberine can help out with that a lot. But like if your meals are all fucked up to begin with, it doesn't really matter what you're putting in your body.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So. Or if you're not getting enough calories or too many calories at that, obviously.
How many carbs a day are you eating now, Will? 850.
What's that?
I said, how many carbs a day are you eating right now?
870 right now.
Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, by the end of this week, we'll probably go up to like 930 or something. Just increase by like another 50 grams or so. We'll see. I weighed in at 221 this morning, so I'm still gaining weight with these macros. So.
I love the simplicity in your training and nutrition. Like I don't mean to make 850 sound simple. It's not simple, but like it's just numbers. Like I love the progressive overload. Like
Right.
seeing your log is like there are smart people out there. It makes me so happy.
I mean, like, dude, I can't work out without, like, I carry a logbook. I mean, just like, who's the one who popularized that? Dante Trudel.
Oh my
You
God,
know,
yeah.
I just do the pen and the paper. I mean, it's like, how are you going to know that you progressed from last week or last month or whatever if you don't write it down? If I don't have that and I just go in and do whatever, like, you know, I'm not going to remember everything I did next week. You know,
Have you run the real dog crap from Dante before?
I haven't. No.
It's so like
insane.
it's so funny because it's so simple. You go in the gym and you do like 4 exercises, and like people will look at you like, there's no way that's gonna work. If you look at some of the examples of what Dante did, like he created Dusty Hanshaw, like a 330-pound monster from just like doing simple movements, heavy as shit, and like just progressing weekly. It's hilarious. I think it's so funny and awesome. Matt Jansen does a lot of that now with his people. Like it's just like,
I know what's his name, the guy that Ben sponsors for Morphogen. I can't remember his name, but he does DC training too. I think he only trains 3 times a week also. But progressing pretty nicely too. Anyone who uses that program that I've seen progress as well if they're doing it correctly. That's why I really like Dante too. I mean, he just, even now he's like, what is he, like 50 or something? He still goes in the gym, lifts heavy as he can. And he looks great for someone who's 50 and who's probably like.
Talk about a great company too. True Nutrition.
Yeah, just everything it stands for. Actually, whenever I first started Leviathan in 2018, he was kind of like, I mentioned my Tudka in the Geared Up bodybuilding group. It was a group that him
and like, Geared Up
and stuff were in, and he kind of gave me the nod. Like I told people that, like, I tested my Tudka and stuff, and Dante is like, yeah, we don't carry Tudka, but I mean, I would give this Tudka from this guy from Leviathan a try. So that's cool. Nice. And it kind of helped, like, guys like Dominic Cardone knows my company. Yes. He did a lot to spread the word on my product before the company that he sponsored with now had their own. But so that was really cool.
Yeah, a little known fact is Dante owns like one of the nicest contract manufacturers in the States. Not one of the biggest. It's not like Pernova, I mean Armada or like JW or anything, but his testing protocols are some of the best that I've seen. So I'm always impressed when I see someone who actually knows their shit with manufacturing, which is actually where Will and I originally connected.
Right.
So I think I don't know. That's another not so sexy topic that is probably more important than people would like to admit.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
But that's a whole nother 2 hours that I don't think we want to go down. So, Will, if anyone has gotten to this point, please plug your social and everything.
So you can follow us on Instagram, just at Leviathan Nutrition with 2 N's there. And then I have a YouTube, Leviathan Nutrition. Our website is leviathan-nutrition.com. And then you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is W Whitlock Fitness, WWHITLOCK, and then fitness.
Awesome.
I think that's all of them. There's so many I tend to forget.
Well, I know I've really enjoyed the science and discussion, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Well, let's end the stream.